All right, so tonight is the third attempt to do this video. I've had this apart at least twice, maybe 3 times, and I've done the assembly video twice. The first one I forgot to turn the microphone on, so it was a silent flick. And the second time, everything was apart and I just put it together and I kind of went through it too fast. So basically what I'm doing, this is a 12mm socket. I'm going to take this shield off. Two 12mm bolts. That takes the shield off of the housing. And so this will be the disassembly. Next, we're going to take this clip right here. So basically, I'm just going to take this small screwdriver, put in like so, just twist it, and pop it out. Just like that. So there's the clip. Once you have the clip off, the gear comes right off. And next we're going to do these two 8mm screws right here. This rebuild kit I bought for this, backstory on this actuator motor is it didn't work. I bought a 2016 4Runner TRD Pro about a month ago, and the rear differential lock didn't work. So the dealership I bought it from, which is a reputable, large national chain, it was certified, so I had a warranty. And I took it back and the dealership couldn't fix it. So they sent it to the Toyota dealership. And the Toyota dealership replaced the actuator motor. It was very expensive. So if you can fix this yourself, you're going to save a ton of money. Don't go to the dealer. It's going to be very expensive. So I did get this working, but I'm going to show you what I did. So basically, next, I don't know a better way to get this apart. God, this thing gets in the way. I don't know a better way to get this apart than to do this. So this cover is next. There's a locating pin here and a locating pin here. It's very tight. So once you have these screws out, it doesn't just pull off. You've got to get some a gap between the cover and the housing itself. So basically what I did was tap this. See, this is starting to open up. And once that starts opening up enough, I can get a flathead screwdriver in here and just start twisting it and just go around a little bit here, a little bit there. Until it comes loose. Okay. So here is the O-ring. It's part of the rebuild kit. This is probably going to come off like this, or this might even stay inside the housing. If it does come out like this, it comes apart. You have an O-ring here. So that's O-ring number 2. This is O-ring number 3, and we'll get to O-ring number 4 in a minute. So this rebuild kit, Land Tank Products, I think was the website that I bought the rebuild kit from. It's very simple. It's some new screws, 4 O-rings, a tube of grease. That's it. So to get this working, basically, when I pulled this apart, this was covered in grease. And as you can see, I've already greased this because I've already put it back together. So I cleaned all of this off, re-greased it, and I put all of this, not all of this stuff, some of this stuff. This went through the parts washer. The cover went through the parts washer, the gear, the shield. I did not put this in the parts washer just because of the wiring, but I did clean it out. And you can tell that there's been water intrusion right in this area. So the next step is grab the Phillips head screwdriver that I forgot. And you have 3 Phillips head screws. These were new in the rebuild kit. Okay, so there's 3 screws. This is going to come off. Okay, so this piece here is the gear that turns this. Like that. So this would be kind of like the equivalent of a pinion gear and kind of like a ring gear. This will pull out. If you're lucky, your magnets will stay in. If your magnets don't stay in, you will have to re-glue those in. Now, an important note, in the end of this, this is the armature. This is the commutator. In the end of this here, you see that little BB. Looks like a BB, but it's smaller. That will come out. So what I did on this was put a dab of grease to hold that in place when I reassembled it. So I did clean the commutator. This did have a black ring around it, so I cleaned that with a Scotch-Brite pad. This I did not touch. It came out of the parts washer looking like that, so I didn't do anything else. So in this part here, you have brushes. These are your motor brushes. Whoops. See how that springs and springs? Okay. That's your brushes for the motor. That's it. That's all you're taking apart. So when you take this apart, of course we got to O-ring number 4, right? O-ring number 4. When you take yours apart, make sure you don't lose these springs. These have should have springs under it. When I took this apart, this did not have springs under the brushes, and the brushes were loose. And what does that mean? Somebody was in here before, and they did not put it back together properly. So somebody has already attempted to fix this once before I got into it, and failed. So anyway, these springs were missing. If you lose these springs, or yours doesn't have springs, either way, like mine, basically what I did, if I can get one out, if you've ever taken a ballpoint pen apart, you know they have a spring in them. That's what that is. So I just took a ballpoint pen spring and cut 2 pieces. And I made my own springs for this. All right. All right, where did it go? I just lost it. Okay. Oh, it's stuck in the grease down there, I think. Crap. Okay. I've lost my spring. Ooh, oh, no, there it is. I see it. So this is probably the most fidgety part of this job is the springs, if you have to mess with these springs, and the brushes, just kind of getting the spring down in there and getting the brush back in place, which is not hard. If you have small fingers, it'll help. All right, so we're back together on that part. So assuming that you've made it this far, basically what you're going to do is just clean everything. There's not a lot to this. You have these contacts down in here. Those need to be cleaned. If there's any buildup or corrosion or anything like that in here, clean it out. Clean the channels for your O-rings. Make sure you clean those. I did have to take some Scotch-Brite and run through here and clean those out. So just make sure everything's clean. This channel here, I had to clean that with Scotch-Brite as well. And that's it. There's not a lot to this. I did have to sand this surface on this. This was pretty corroded and rough, so I did have to sand that. Still looks rough, but it's actually smooth. And these are stops. So if you see how this is made, that stops the travel of this. Okay, and we'll get into that more in a minute. So once you're at the point of having everything clean, what's next? You put it back together. So next we're going to just reverse the process, right? So when you put this together, you want to put some grease on this part here, and because that goes down into a little pocket down at the bottom to support it. And I'll put grease on this part and the little BB. So basically I'm just going to work this part back down in. Okay, so that's it. That's already in. Make sure your brushes are in contact with the commutator. See the teeth down in here? That's what turns the large gear. Right? So I'm not going to put the O-ring back in this part yet, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. So when you put this cover on, there's these two little alignment pins, and those are going to correspond with this housing. A hole here and a hole there. So that's where your alignment pins go. Now these magnets are going to try to pull this down on there. So just kind of work it in place. Not like that. All right, so make sure we're lined up, and let's go in this way. All right, there we go. So for now, I'm going to put these screws in. And again, we left that O-ring out for a reason. So let me get these screws started. These just have to be snug. You don't have to really tighten them at this point. Next step is what? Well, we got to put this big gear in here, right? So put some grease here. This whole surface needs to be greased here. And then we're going to drop this in. So you want to pay attention to how you line this up. Somewhat. It doesn't really matter at this point, but this is kind of the orientation of how it's going to look installed on the axle. Your axle housing is this way. That's the front of the vehicle. And we want to make sure that we're within the travel of the stops. So we know the stops are on the bottom. So this piece here, we'll just kind of orient, whoop, wrong way. Orient that this way. Just like that. So next, you're going to bring this up. Go ahead and put your O-ring in. it's going to be loose. It really doesn't sit down in that channel very much, but that is going to move. So you want to kind of keep this flat as you put it together. You want to grease this O-ring, the new O-ring here on this shaft. Do put some grease on that. Okay, remember those pins we had to fight to get it apart, right? Well, now you got to fight them to get it together. Not as bad. So go ahead and start a couple of screws. Take your 8mm socket. And basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to look in the gap. So I'm going to watch in that gap and make sure my O-ring stays in place. Hold it flat, and I'm just going to take these screws and I'm going to tighten this one a little bit and then this one a little bit and just alternate back and forth. And that makes sure that we're pulling this cover down evenly. If you do one side first, it's going to be crooked and be in a bind. Okay, so we are together on that part. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten these. I am using the proper torque spec here of that feels good. Yep, that feels good. So, all right, next is our gear. Your gear is going to go on. You want to see these marks. These are called match marks. That's incorrect. That is correct. You want to see that side up. And that's going to go on like so, just like it came off. All right, so you're going to grab your clip, and you're going to go back over to your toolbox because you forgot to bring pliers over, and grab some pliers. And for this one, I have the needle nose variety. So I'm just going to kind of position this in place and hope that I don't screw up and launch it across the shop. All right, there we go. So our gear's in place. Now, what's next, right? So the orientation of this gear, this is kind of a long story, but if you take your differential out of the housing, it has to be in the locked position. So if you're looking at the rear of the vehicle from the front, you're going to see it this way. When you pull this off and you look in the hole in the housing that this goes in, you're going to see the fork. And it's going to have teeth that correspond with this gear. So if you're looking at it this way, back of the vehicle, you're going to have to manually move that locking fork to your left or to the center of the differential. That's going to lock your diff. And that lets you get this your differential installed. So when you install this, your differential is locked. You need to have your button engaged to lock the diff. That needs to be on. So the next step, everything has to be timed. Your differential is locked, your button is engaged, and this needs to be in the position of locked, right? Which means this gear needs to be mostly, looking at it from this perspective, needs to be mostly clockwise. Now these marks, you can still see the marks, right? Here's one here, one here. So the marks need to be 0 to 5 degrees past a particular point. That's difficult to show you this. In the factory service manual, it's going to show you that this mark needs to be 0 to 5 degrees past this line. This is going to be up 0 to 5 degrees that direction. How do we get there? There's a couple of ways. So you can manually turn this. Remember, we left this O-ring out on purpose. Okay. Here's our cover. Now, if you turn this, you see which direction we're going. All right, so if you turn this manually, you can see that move. Now, it takes a lot of turns to get that gear to move. Now, this is coming out. This is starting to come out. So that means I have reached the end. So let's start turning this back. I may have clocked that incorrectly. Actually, so we're coming up on that 0 to 5 degrees there. If you can see. So if I keep turning this, you can see which way I'm moving my fingers and how I'm turning it. This is starting to come out. That means I have reached the end of the travel, and this is actually unscrewing itself from that gear. So if I start turning it this way, it goes back down in, and that gear is going to start moving. So I'm just going to eyeball this. I mean, at that point, before I would install this, I would double check that 0 to 5 degrees and reference the service manual again. But at this point, for this video, let's call it good. Now again, I'm going to leave this O-ring out, and I'll tell you why. So you can test operation. You can make sure. So let's say you bought one of these used, and you don't even know if it works. The service manual is going to tell you to take a AA battery. If I can get this started. So the service manual is going to tell you to take a AA battery and connect some wires to it. Obviously, you're going to use tape or whatever method you can, excuse me, to hold wires to a battery. So you can test operation on this. All right, see how the plug has 2 pins on top, 3 on the bottom. We're going to use the top 2. Only the top 2. So if you alternate negative and positive between these two, the motor's going to turn one way or the other. So I've got to go grab, let me go grab something real quick. I was not prepared. Sometimes I'm just not prepared. I thought I was. Pay no attention to that. All right, so what I'm going to do is lay this here and clamp that in the vise. I do have a 12-volt power supply. You can use 12 volts. You can use 9 volts. But the problem is, the more voltage you use, the faster that motor is going to turn, and the more difficult it becomes to line things up. So, oh, I lost a wire. Crap. Well, where did that wire go? I may have to make another one real quick. Okay, stand by here. We're going to fix a crisis. I've lost a wire. Okay, I think we have this fixed. So basically what I'm going to do is turn the power supply on. And I'm just going to touch these just to make sure we have some function. I don't want it to go clockwise too far, because once you get these past a particular point, it's hard to get them started back with power. Now you could pull this off and turn it by hand and get it started back the other way. So if you go too far, it's okay, and if it doesn't work again, just know that you're going to have to pull this off and probably get it started back by hand. So let's try this and see which way we go. All right, so we're going counterclockwise. That's the way I want, at my perspective anyways, counterclockwise. So let's say, I don't know how, okay, I think I just hit a stop in there. So let's see if it'll go back. So this is a good way to test something if you've bought it used. We know this works, so we just saw it move, right? So let's see if I can get it close to kind of where I was. Now you can see the benefit of using a smaller voltage or lower voltage. You have more control over the movement. Whereas if you do 12 volts, oh, didn't turn it on. Yes, it's on. If you do 12 volts, it moves faster. And I'm going to stop right there. If you use a lower voltage, you have more control over how fast this moves, and you can watch it better to set your timing. Now again, this is just mainly for entertainment purposes, but you want this to be mostly this direction, because this is going to be your locked position. Now when you install this, turn everything on, hit the button to disengage the locker. This is going to turn counterclockwise from this perspective, counterclockwise to disengage the locker. So you want to start it in the locked position so you can then unlock it when it's installed. All right, I'm going to put this O-ring in, and this is done. So I know this works. We saw it move. It's clean, greased, new O-rings, ready to go, right? So thanks for watching. If this helped you, please leave a like, consider subscribing, and maybe share it with a friend. Maybe somebody you know is going through this. So anyway, see ya.